Okay, good Shabbos. And Happy New Year. We've made it to 2022. Baruch Hashem, made it through another difficult year. Baruch Hashem. All right, so I hope you guys enjoyed the holidays. For those of you that went away, some of you were able to travel. I can see some of you got a bit of a tan. I could see the sand fall out behind your ears when you walked in here this morning. So Baruch Hashem, you guys traveled safe and you had some fun going abroad. We're here in Pretoria. We had a very wet December. We couldn't even swim. It was one of the weirdest Decembers in many years. But Baruch Hashem, you guys are back. Now, I couldn't go anywhere neither, so I ended up having a staycation. Right? If you ask me where I went, I'm going to say Romania. I remained here. So I unfortunately was stuck here while I was thinking about some of you guys sitting there on the sea sand, or some of you going to the bush, or wherever you guys went to the mountains during the holiday, and I couldn't do anything. So you know what I did? I tried to hack the system. I tried to go on a virtual holiday. So what I did was, because we were supposed to be in Sweden, I would every morning when I wake up, put on the TV and put a fake video of this fire crackling, so that all day long it sounds like I'm in the snow in Sweden. And the next day I'd wake up and I put snow on the TV all day, so it looks like it's snowing outside. And I try and trick myself virtually as if I was actually going on vacation. I even took a few virtual tours on YouTube to make it feel like I was actually a tourist. I almost felt like throwing money out the window as well. So I can just waste money and feel like I'm on holiday. But going on a virtual tour is just not the same thing. It's not the same as getting your toes in the sand, smelling the different air, etc., right? Because every 5 minutes, someone tries to jump over your wall and steal your stuff in Korea. So virtual reality versus real reality. How many of you, let's take a poll here, raising your hand. How many of you know what the metaverse is? Hands in the air. Huh? All right, well done. Half of us do, half of us don't. It was also like kind of like an age count we did right there. The metaverse. I want to talk a little bit about the metaverse today. So the metaverse, for those of you who don't know what it is kind of like a virtual reality, a virtual alternate reality that Facebook actually is creating. It's this online world that you can go into. And there's many different ways you can access it, either through your phone or through your computer. But the best way to do it is to put on those virtual reality goggles, so that whenever you look around, it looks like you're literally in a different world, in a different universe. And while you're in there, you create your own little avatar, and you can walk around, interact with other people in the metaverse, chat with them, etc., etc. And it's a really big thing. They announced this, I think it became more public about 2 months ago. Towards the beginning of December, it became a big thing. And we all saw Facebook change their name to Meta, because their big focus now is this metaverse thing that they want to start implementing, this alternate reality. And it's so big that people are already leaving their jobs because they're going to go start a job in the metaverse, a fake virtual world. Yeah, you can do landscaping. Yes, yes, and plumbing. Well, there is those games where you do the plumbing. There's a way. People are getting jobs there. People are already investing in this virtual world. It's still coming. It's not open yet. They're still running it. They're still beta testing it. And obviously, since it's an invisible world with invisible stuff, you have to pay with invisible money. They cryptocurrency in this world as well. And you have to actually buy property in this world. It's monopoly. It sounds like monopoly. Well, that's the goal of Facebook, I think, is to get a monopoly. But anyway, how's that? You actually have to buy property that doesn't exist. It exists in a virtual world. This is the world we're living in today. Eh? Cryptocurrency is the same thing. We're mining money that doesn't exist. So this is an amazing thing that actually the world is going to. This is the future. One of these days, you're not going to go to work anymore, or you're not going to Zoom anymore. You're going to put on your virtual reality goggles, and you're going to be in your meeting with delegates from all over the world, looking at their avatars with their pink hair and spikes and all the weird stuff. You can make yourself look however you want. You can have these fancy buildings. Have any of you ever looked at one of these metaverse things, played a game like this before? There's a few that exist already. Microsoft is making one. There's one that already exists. When I was in university, PlayStation used to have a virtual world like this, and I would come home after class. My parents thought I would study. I would spend the whole afternoon and night in this virtual world. I had houses on the beach. I had a log cabin. I had the coolest clothes, etc., etc. And I made real friends from other countries. And I actually went to visit these people in real life as well. I'm still friends with them till today. This is a real thing, and this is the future, apparently, according to all the big tech guys that are sitting up there in Silicon Valley. Now, if there is a new universe or a new world about to be started, what do we know about Judaism? Chabad is going to build a shul immediately. And they've done that. There's already a Chabad shul in the metaverse. And they've lined it up. They've got rabbis lined up who are going to work there full time. If you want to come speak with a rabbi, he's going to be there. You can have a private one-on-one session with a rabbi. They're going to give classes where you can sit into the classes. They're going to have all their videos that they've made over the years up there. You can go to shul in the metaverse as well. And who knows, maybe even here with us one day. Instead of zooming like this face-to-face, you can put on your virtual reality goggles and you can look left and right and see who's praying, who's sleeping. Etc. That roaring lion you were talking about earlier. Don't snore too loud because you'll wake up the rest of us. So that's where the world is heading. And many people have got different opinions of this, of course. I'm sure each one of you have your own opinion about this and how it might be good or it might be bad. I've got my bad feelings about it, but it's an opportunity to do something, to use technology for greater good as well in the future. We'll see what happens, right? Everyone has their own opinion. But most Jewish people immediately had a negative opinion. Why? Because what does meta mean in Hebrew? Dead. Death. So as soon as Facebook changed their name to Meta, everyone in Hebrew started kidding. Your metaverse is now the death verse. You go there to die. Right? So think about this, right? What are your feelings about this? Because it isn't reality. It's a fake virtual reality. And how thin is the line between what we do in virtual reality versus what we do over here in reality? It's a very fine line, but that very fine line, I think, causes a major gap in who we are, in our expressions. Because just look at how we are already today when we go on the internet. If you go and find yourself busy in a comment section, you say stuff in that comment section you wouldn't say in front of your mother. Why? Because on the internet, we have a source of anonymity, right? People can't find us at our house, and we're not speaking to someone in their face, and you can't see their reactions. And we say the first thing that comes on into our minds, whereas in reality, we're a bit more cautious. So we are completely different in a virtual world than we are in the real world. However, if we eventually go into this virtual reality one day, I would say you guys should try as much as possible to be as real in that world, because that's what we're meant to be. The Torah is teaching us reality wherever you go, even if it's into a virtual world as well. But I personally, I don't think it's a good idea. And the reason why I think this is because there's a lot lost when you go into a virtual reality. For example, those of you that have ever read an ebook, I have read a lot of ebooks over the last few years because it's so expensive to import these books. So I eventually end up buying an ebook, and it is simply not the same, right? You don't know the picture of the cover because usually with a book, you can feel it, you know the texture, you know the feeling, you know how thick the book is. So you know how scared you should be of finishing the book, right? You know how long it's going to take you. When I look at my cupboard with all my books, I look at that book and I have a relationship with that book. It's got 3 coffee stains and there's still some chips in the back. All my Pesach books I have to clean every year because I know that I spoil my food and my cookies while I eat my Pesach books. When it comes to Pesach week, you don't have comments anywhere, right? You have relationships. I can remember from books that this first part and that last part were very nice. When I read something on a tablet, I don't know the difference between any of the 50 books that I've read on a tablet. There is something different. There's a tangible feeling we need to have with. There's behind closed doors. So I believe there is a difference between the virtual and the real world. And I want to use this idea, this concept of the metaverse, which is coming our way, as a metaphor for our faith and how we practice and envision our faith and practice our faith in connection with this week's parasha. Because this week's parasha is Parashat Bo, which means go to Pharaoh. And in this parasha, we finish off the 10 plagues. We get the final 3 plagues, the plague of the cockroaches, like the crickets, the locusts, and then we got the plague of darkness, and then we end with the final one plague, the death of the firstborn. And you know, it's amazing that God sent so many plagues that we actually have to spread it over 2 parashas. You know, it overflows into this parasha, which makes us sing that song we sing on Pesach. It would have been enough if you only sent 1 plague. But God ended up doing more and more so that his name would be glorified. Now, in the parasha, we learn about laws of Pesach, which every year when we come to this parasha is a bit of a wake-up call and a warning sign that Pesach is coming. Get ready, get busy. But Baruch Hashem, this year is a leap year. So we have a whole extra month before Pesach arrives this year. We've got more time to prepare. Baruch Hashem. So if you look at the Torah as you've been reading it so far, from Genesis till today's Parashat Bo, it's been some wonderful stories, historical retellings of our ancestors. Abraham, from the creation, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph and the brothers, eventually into the slavery and the story of Moses. But today, in this week's Parashat, everything changes because the Torah shifts from story mode into more practicality. Because in this week's Parashat, we get mitzvot, commandments that still apply till today. I think there's 21 commandments in this week's Parashat, whereas before this, depending on which rabbi you ask, there were only like 3 commandments. And these commandments weren't directly given. These were just like traditional commandments. Because Jacob wrestled and got knocked in the hip, we don't eat the hip of an animal, for example, right? This week's Parashat, however, after we read about the 3 plagues, God gives the commandments for the Pesach offering and the Pesach festival, which still apply till today. So the story of Genesis, the story of Exodus so far, this this memory that we have in our psyche hidden away over here, now becomes practical. It's almost as if the virtual reality becomes now the real world in front of us, where we have to actually do this. And we have to connect the two and make it into a real world application. So the Sefer HaChinuch comes along on this parasha and asks the question, why does the Torah, why does Hashem give us so many commandments just to remember the Exodus? Couldn't we have gotten one commandment that says, remember the Exodus, eat matzah? That's it. Why must we not break the bone of the animal? Why must we roast it specifically on fire? Why must we sit like this and eat in a hurry? Why must we lean left? Why must we do all these things we do every year in our Pesach Seder? Why not do just one thing? And it answers the question as follows. It says, because a mitzvah is a physical embodiment of a spiritual reality. When we perform a mitzvah, we are physically doing something that is written in the spiritual realm, so to speak. So how do you define faith? Hebrews 11 gives us a definition for the word faith, right? It's faith. If you think about it, it's also up there in virtual reality. Can you see faith? Can you touch it? Can you taste it? Hebrews says faith is confidence in what we hope for, somewhere out there in the metaverse, right? Assurance of things not seen, things you can't touch, things that aren't real. That's the definition of faith according to Hebrews. Sounds like the metaverse, right? Sounds like the virtual reality. These unseen things, that's our faith. What we believe in is something unseen. We can't quantify it, right? And the problem with that is that it might lead us to ask the question, if I grasp the spiritual concept of what God is trying to teach me, why do I need to do the physical commandment? Have you ever thought about this when it comes to faith? Is it necessary to physically do the commandment if you grasp the spiritual lesson? This is a question we have to ask ourselves. If I just believe, do I actually have to do anything? Can I just believe? Isn't that what faith is? Doing it would then be legalism, wouldn't it? Unfortunately, many people view faith in this way. That faith is some intangible belief there in a virtual reality of our world, somewhere in our head or in our heart, hiding away in the metaverse. And this, unfortunately, over the years, has creeped its way into our theology. If you were to ask any modern Christian to summarize the entire message of the Bible into one sentence, what would they say? Believe in Jesus and you will be saved. Our entire religion can be summed up into a thought or a feeling. Just believe. It's no longer practical. There's nothing you do anymore. And if you read the Gospels, how many verses is there in the Gospels where Yeshua talks about believing in him? 1 or 2. The rest of the Gospel is all about doing. Yeshua is teaching us how to put your faith into practice. That's how we practice our faith. It is not meant to be something intangible. It's meant to be how we live our life. That's why the Chinuch says, a mitzvah, a commandment, is a physical embodiment of the spiritual reality. And we still need to keep the commandments, even if we understand the spiritual application behind it. Because let's go back to this week's parasha, death of the firstborn. If any of the Israelites sat in their home that night and decided, I'm not going to slaughter this goat and put the blood on the doorpost because I understand it's just a shadow of the Messiah one day. What do you think would have happened to them that night? They would have died. Why does God give these commandments? Well, you just said, oh, I believe God. I don't need to do this. I believe in you. they still would have died that day. So Hebrews 11, when it gives us the definition of faith, it also tells us how faith is acted out through the entire Bible, right? It's got that Hall of Fame of faith in Hebrews 11. And with Moses, it says, by faith, Moses kept the Pesach and the sprinkling of the blood on the doorpost. By faith, he did it. So faith isn't just believing something. Faith is putting that belief into action. And you do the action, you do the mitzvah, you do the physical reality because you have faith. If you just sit back and believe something, you don't have faith. You have a thought. God becomes nothing but a superstition to you, an afterthought. Once you do it through speech or through action, it becomes a reality. So God told the Jews, you guys must paint your doorposts. Does God not know which house is a Jewish household? He knows. He can smell the brisket. He knows which house is a Jewish household. Yet he tells us to do this physical act for a reason. What's the reason? We'll ask God. Maybe we'll talk about it next year. But I thought about this because we just have this holiday period behind us now, right? Starting the new year, many of you guys relax. Those of you that went to Cape Town have come back a lot more chilled. So I thought to myself, this is what happens to us every time we have like a vacation or a holiday. We have the danger of becoming sluggish in our faith. We might think that, just knowledge of God is good enough. I don't actually have to do what the Bible tells me to do. I know that the Sabbath is the Sabbath. God doesn't ask you to know the Sabbath. God asks you to keep the Sabbath, to guard the Sabbath, to respect it, etc., etc. Pesach. We can't just say to God, oh, I know the meaning of Pesach because of what happened in the New Testament, so I don't have to keep all those laws and prepare and clean my house and all those things. God knows that you know the meaning of Pesach, but he still gives us commandment upon commandment upon commandment in what to do and how to keep the Pesach because he knows what's best for us. So when we don't do what God tells us, when we just tell him, don't worry, I got the message, I'll see you later, what we're actually saying to God is that we know better than him. We understand reality better than him. And if any of us ever claim to understand God, then he's no longer God. He's no longer above us. Then he's just equal with us. We're calling ourselves gods when we do this. So we are not like that. Our faith needs to be manifested through our actions. Right? We all know the famous verse from James. It says, faith without works is, in Hebrew, meta. Right? Faith without works is meta. It's the meta verse. And even with our salvation through Yeshua, we see the same thing happen on our Pesach Seders, right? Because, of course, we always study the crucifixion during Pesach time. And what does Yeshua ask of us? He gives us, as his followers, a mitzvah to perform every year at Pesach. He takes that cup of wine from the Seder. Our practice at least here is that it's the third cup of the Pesach Seder, the cup of salvation. And he says to us, you shall take this cup. This is the blood of my body, the blood of the covenant. And when you take this cup, do this in remembrance of me. When he says remembrance, he joins it with do this. Remembrance is an active thing. And we literally have to drink the cup of wine every year in Pesach to remind ourselves of that covenant, right? We don't just think about what Yeshua did for us, we have to enact it. Who knows what the Hebrew word is for history? I don't expect you to. Huh? Bible. That's close enough. That's basic instructions before leaving Earth. So the Hebrew word for history is historia. Sound Hebrew to you? No, because there is no Hebrew word for history. They had to steal a word from the Latin, English or whatever. The closest thing we get in the Torah to the word history is the word zachor, to remember, right? Remembrances, as Yeshua says here. Do this in remembrance of me. So our history, what we've been studying this whole time from the beginning of Genesis to today's parasha, it somehow needs to be brought into action in our lives. Not just think about it, not just remember that history, once upon a time this happened. Zachor is active. We still have to remember it through our actions. Well, Yeshua says, do this in remembrance of me. It's more than just a thought. God commands us to remember the Exodus. How do we remember the Exodus? You sit in your chair and think about it? No, we do a Pesach Seder routine for how many days and stress ourselves for a whole week, eat that cardboard and struggle with our intestinal systems. We physically remember through our actions. But when God says to us, remember the Sabbath, what does it mean? Oh, wait, today's Saturday. No. Remember the Sabbath, prepare for it. You light the candles, you cook a meal, you enjoy it, you celebrate it, you rest on the day. when God says he remembered Sarah, or he remembered Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, not that he forgot about them. It's because what happened was he followed with action. They fell pregnant. He fulfilled the promises. And with our forefathers, he fulfilled the covenants that he promised to them many years ago. Faith, remembrance is done through action. Even God himself does it that way. So by doing the mitzvot that God gives us, like the ones we find in this week's parashah, we are making our faith real. It's not up there in the metaverse. It is real. We're making it into a physical, tangible thing. You know, it's interesting. I was reminded of a story this week told by Rabbi Jonathan Sachs a few years ago about the Dalai Lama. The Dalai Lama, of course, comes from Tibet, right? He had all his followers in Tibet, and they got exiled from Tibet. So they had to go stay in India. And he was wondering, what's he going to do now? What about his followers? What about his teachings? He's living in exile. How do you live in exile and keep your faith and keep your beliefs? So what did he do? He decided to go to the people who are experts in living in exile and keeping their faith, the Jews. So he went to the Jews and to the rabbis and to the scribes there in India, and he asked them, hey, how do you guys live in exile but still keep your faith? And what did they do? They organized for him a Pesach Seder. They flew him out, the Dalai Lama, to Washington, D.C., and they held a Pesach Seder and showed him, this is how we keep our faith alive, by making it a physical thing, by doing what this week's parasha tells us every single year, reenacting history so that history becomes part of our history as well. History isn't something in the past, it's something we live over and over again. So in this parasha, God tells us to do these mitzvot, to remember the stories of Genesis and Exodus through our actions every day, so that we can experience them for ourselves. There's that famous quote about Pesach from the Talmud Tractate Pesachim that says, when it comes to the Pesach Seder night, every individual needs to feel as if they themselves personally came out of Egypt with that generation from the Exodus. That's why we do all these elaborate things at our Pesach Seders. That's why the kids, this week's parasha, are told to ask questions, to inquire about it, so that they also feel it happened to them. Wicked son, however, the wicked son spends all day in the metaverse. He says, what is this thing to you? No, it's supposed to be, what did God do for us back then? Please tell me. History needs to continue by our faith through our actions. So I encourage all of you to start off this new year, not imagining things and thinking about your faith and say, oh, I believe, but to actually get down and do it. Make your faith a reality. Shabbat Shalom.
Amen. Amen.
Oh my.